You had a question right there.
Yeah, it may be premature, but do you have any prediction as to the likelihood that the Obama administration will be successful in converting this country to a socialistic country?
Well, to be fair to Obama, we had been getting that way anyway, because if you look at the historic government role in GDP, it had gone from 17, 18, I think under Bush it went up to 19.5, and at the end of the 4 years if his budgets are sustained, we'll be up to near 38% GDP controlled by the government, which will be analogous to many European countries. Most recessions after 3 years, it's sort of like a runner who runs really fast and then just collapses and gets up after an hour and runs again. So we were going to have a natural rebound anyway. I think we will. So if we have a rebound, and Bush had a little recession when he started, and he had great growth after that. So if the rebound happens after the midterm election, then I think he might do pretty well. But I'm very pessimistic, as I said, because the trends had already been there. When a Republican or conservative talks about cutting government, he means, at best, cutting the rate of growth to match that of inflation. And Social Security, Medicare, I don't know how you deal with those, because it would require a leader to be courageous and to say, if you're living, if Social Security you were getting at 65 and everybody died at 55, the average, and now you're living to 78, well then you're not going to retire till 67, I'm sorry. And you know what? When my grandfather got a heart attack in 1975, they gave him some nitroglycerin tablets and they said, you had a pretty good run, take it easy. And now when you're 82 and you have some heart problems, you get a bypass, you get an artificial hip, you got to tell the American people that life is tragic and we are not able to, to ensure you can die in your sleep at 96. It's not going to happen to everybody. That's a tragic thing to tell you, because if we don't do that, we're going to go broke. And that's, how do you deal with other things that, you might have to have 2 or 3 children to remain competitive. That we're very lucky here in the United States, because we can look at Europe and we can see the wages of childlessness, no belief in transcendence, either atheism or agnosticism, pacifism, no military potential at all to defend themselves, a state-run economy, a state workforce. And while the Europeans had been laughing at the Anglo-Saxons for this mess, you start to look at the European financial problem, and it's as bad or worse than ours, with one great caveat. When they have a housing collapse, they don't have 2.3% of growing, they're shrinking. And so I don't see how they're going to grow their way out of anything. And then California, of course. We in California have the highest sales and income tax and the highest deficits. And we're starting to see that they're connected. And those are sort of, to me, those are the 2 things you look at and say, do not become like Europe and do not become like California. After all, think about it. We inherited this state that had a 1,300-mile coastline, 2 greatest ports in the world, in Oakland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. More timber than anybody can imagine. We had oil offshore. We had oil all over the San Francisco. We had the richest farming in the world. We had the Sierra Nevada gravity-fed irrigation. We had Disneyland. We had Napa Valley, Silicon Valley. What did we do? We had grandparents that worked hard and gave us 110 JCs, 23 state universities, 10 UCs. And they gave us a wonderful instrument. And we did that in 1 generation. Why? Because we wanted everything. We wanted redwood decks, but we didn't want to cut a tree. We wanted an SUV, we didn't want to drill any oil. We wanted them, they to pay for Medi-Cal, Medicare. I'm in a rant now. I was going to the airport and I saw the Palo Alto newspaper publish the salaries of the San Mateo workers. Well, there was 100 people, over $210,000 city workers. That's hard to pay for. And so I think that we're there now, and it's going to be very hard for somebody to have a tragic life and say, life's not fair, it's going to be rugged, it's brutal, but it's worth it, rather than have an all-encompassing government, because we know where that goes in the 20th century. Yeah, one last question.
I have a question about the $550 billion, the $550 billion, what appeared to be cyber warfare on September 15th.
What now?
The September 15th, what appeared to be cyber warfare.
Yes.
And who you might speculate.
You mean on the September 14, 15 meltdown?
Yes.
Yeah.
And who you might speculate would have been behind it. And if there is a correlation in the choice of Charles Freeman and the fact that he will not be vetted.
You know, I don't know the answer why. I do know that in June and July we had the Bear Stearns problem. And I do know that I had been reading and I had read what George Bush said, all of 2007 and 8, that Fannie and Freddie were not solvent. And I do know I've been reading the news, in other words, that we were creating a pyramid scheme. And I do know people, my immediate acquaintance, that were doing things that I had never heard of before. And they were doing 2 or 3 things I had never heard of. One of them was, somebody told me that he had a 4th mortgage on his home. I'd never heard of that before. The second person told me they were going to buy a home, and they were taking 2 loans out. 2 loans, one for the principal and one for the down payment. So they had no down payment. And then the other thing I noticed, sometime in August and September, I began hearing all these ads on radio everywhere. Oh, there were 3 ads. Renegotiate your IRS debt, get out of your mortgage debt, and get out of your credit card debt. And every time I heard one, I thought, well, who pays for that? So we were in a spiral of borrowed money, derivatives, bundling, and it was like musical chairs, I think. The answer to your question is, I don't know what the exact catalyst made it on that particular day, but somebody somewhere said, you know what, this is musical chairs. The music's going to stop, and I'm going to get my seat, because somebody's not going to have seats. And that's what happened. When somebody said, no more, it's not real, then I'm getting out. And somebody said, Joe's getting out. He's liquidating. Then it started cascading. Thank you very much.